Mama Murdered a Podcast. I'm your host, AB. And this week on Mama Murdered a Podcast, we're covering part 2 of the Jennifer Kesse case, who seemingly vanished after returning home from a vacation with her long-distance boyfriend, Rob. The couple spoke on the phone the night before Jennifer was reported missing, and no one ever saw or spoke to her again. And with this being a part 2 episode, I would, as always, highly suggest that you go back and listen to part 1 before you try to start here, or else this episode may not make a whole lot of sense to you. So, with all that being said, and without further ado, let's get it. So let's jump right back into where we left off, where the police didn't really take Jennifer's disappearance seriously, and they claimed that she'd probably just gotten into an argument with her long-distance boyfriend, and that she would eventually return home. And they were just so sure of this because Jennifer's car was also missing. So Jennifer's family, friends, and boyfriend all came together to Jennifer's condo, and they used her condo kind of like their own command center of operation in finding Jennifer. And police would later sort of throw shade at the family for having like 10 or more people walking around inside of Jennifer's condo, which could have potentially been the scene of a crime. But if police would have taken their concern seriously from the jump, then the family probably wouldn't have had to turn Jennifer's condo into a command center to start with. Because let's be real, everything we've learned about Jennifer in part 1, if the last time that anyone spoke to Jennifer was on Monday night when she called her boyfriend Rob from her landline phone, then wouldn't that be pretty easy to deduce that she would have been at home that night, right? And as safety conscious as Jennifer was, do you really think she's going out late at night by herself, knowing that she had to get up for work tomorrow? Because that just doesn't sound like something that she would have done. And before I get to mention it, Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce Kesse, they lived about 2 hours from Jennifer's complex. So did her brother Logan. So by the time that Drew, Joyce, and Logan actually made it to Jennifer's condo, that would have already been an additional 2 hours that Jennifer hadn't been seen or heard from. So both of Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce, and her brother Logan, along with Jennifer's boyfriend and his mom, and of course some of Jennifer's closest friends, they all came together and turned her condo into a command center like I said. They printed out missing persons flyers, and they passed them out to anyone they saw. They made signs to tack up in surrounding areas, and they were even standing on the corners by red lights to be able to pass these flyers out to people that were stopping at the red lights on the roads. I mean, her family was on top of it. And I keep finding myself wanting to call Jennifer's condo an apartment, but it was definitely a condo. But if I do mistakenly call it an apartment, just know that I'm aware that it is a condo. So Jennifer's parents went straight to the media. They did news interviews, they made pleas to the public for information, they asked for eyewitnesses to come forward. They did it all. But let's talk about the security of this condo complex that Jennifer had purchased, because this complex had kind of sold Jennifer on the idea that this was a safe complex in a gated community with a guard at the main entrance checking in any visitors that were coming in and out. But that was not at all the reality of the security of this complex, because once police started taking the family's claims seriously and they actually started to look around, there were no security cameras anywhere around the Mosaic at Millennia complex. So that means that there was no CCTV footage to go through to see if anyone could point to what happened to Jennifer after she left her condo that morning. And anything that did happen wouldn't have been caught on security cameras. Police also questioned anyone living at or working at the complex, but keep in mind a lot of the construction workers weren't even listed as employees of the complex at all. And after questioning who they could track down, no one reported hearing or seeing anything suspicious. And by the next day, the Orlando Police Department still wasn't comfortable with launching a full-blown investigation into where Jennifer was, so we're coming up on the 48-hour mark. And the whole reason that the Orlando Police Department were kind of hesitant to go through with a full-blown investigation and missing persons report is because the police department had actually gotten faulty information when they had tried to ping Jennifer's cell phone movements on the last night that she spoke to anyone. So originally, Orlando PD were under the impression that Jennifer had left her condo and then driven to a few other places that were local. But after that information was later re-examined, it was learned that Jennifer had actually been inside of her condo all night on the night before she was reported missing. and that she had absolutely not been out driving late to a few different local places like the phone pings had showed. But before this information was re-examined, police were kind of under the impression that Jennifer and her boyfriend Rob had gotten into an argument the night before, and then there was the screw up from the phone pings, so it kind of did look like Jennifer had left her apartment, and then she had gone to a few places after the argument, but that wasn't true. And the truth was, Jennifer and her phone had never even left her apartment on the night before she was believed to be missing. And one way to kind of know that for sure is to think about the fact that Jennifer knew better than to not answer her phone if her parents called. So even if she would have left that night after she hung up with Rob, then she would have at least taken her cell phone with her in case her parents called. And I'm not super sure how the phone pings got so screwed up, but I mean, here we are. Jennifer had also never mailed her brother's friend's cell phone that morning either, and that friend's phone has still never been found. Even though that probably would have been one of the first things that Jennifer did that morning, because there was both a UPS and a FedEx location, either inside of her work building or super close by. And even though police were slow to help find Jennifer or investigate what happened, Jennifer's family were working overtime to make sure that everyone in that area knew what Jennifer's face looked like, and her family also made sure that everyone in the area knew what Jennifer's car looked like, which was a 2004 black Chevy Malibu. And thank God for Jennifer's parents, because just 2 days after Jennifer's parents tried to report her missing, it was on Thursday, January 26th, that police got a call from an apartment complex that was only about a mile away from Jennifer's condo. And this call came in from the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment complex, claiming that there was a car in their parking lot that looked a lot like Jennifer's car, and they said that that car was parked in the visitor parking lot. And even though the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment building was only about a mile or so away from Jennifer's complex, it was almost like these two different complexes were on opposite sides of the world. Jennifer's condo had been sold to her as a safe property, a gated community that was guarded, a secure facility that, kept track of everyone coming and going. We know that's not what it was, but, that's what they sold the idea of. But the Huntington-on-the-Green complex, where Jennifer's car was found, was a known area for drugs, gang violence, and high crime, even though the two complexes were on the same road and only a mile apart from one another. There were actually people that came forward later to let police know that they lived in the area and that they would have taken different roads that would have made their trip 3 times longer just to avoid having to drive in the direction anywhere near the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment complex. So, not a good area. Now, police were able to confirm that the car that was found was in fact Jennifer's car. But then, police did something hella weird. They actually called Jennifer's boyfriend Rob and asked if he would be willing to come to the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment complex where Jennifer's car was found, and if he would help go through the car and see if anything was missing or if anything was out of place. And this is weird because what if the car was the crime scene? Which later we'll find out that the car actually likely was the crime scene. So why would they have someone come in and tamper with a potential crime scene? Another thing that's weird is that Drew Kesse, Jennifer's dad, is actually pretty convinced that the police called Rob to the scene of where Jennifer's car was found so that if the trunk of the car was opened and Jennifer's body was discovered inside the trunk, Drew believes that police wanted Rob there to be the one to open the trunk so that they could gauge his reaction to finding Jennifer's body if her body had been found in the trunk of her own car. Which is wild, because Rob's alibi is literally rock solid. He lived more than 3 hours away, and phone records show that he was home that night before Jennifer went missing, and the next morning before she was reported missing. He also made it to work on time and offered to help police every step of the way in trying to piece together what happened to his girlfriend. But while police were searching Jennifer's car, they found a small portable DVD player still in the manufactured box in the backseat of her car that I believe her boyfriend Rob had given her. But with the DVD player still being inside the car, that kind of rules out the possibility of this being like a robbery gone wrong. Because while a portable DVD player today would cost about $10 at any pawn shop, back in 2006, they were outrageously expensive and would have been one of the first things that someone would have grabbed if robbery had been the actual motive. So that kind of throws that theory of a robbery gone wrong right out the window. Also, inside of Jennifer's car was a pair of flip-flops that her parents say she wore on her way to work. So when she'd get to work, she would just change into her work shoes in the parking lot, before she ever actually walked into work. And then when she would get off of work, she would throw her work shoes back in the car and slide her flip-flops back on. So the flip-flops were still in the car. There was also a broken mailbox key that went to Jennifer's mailbox at her condo. The key had somehow broken and Jennifer had to get a new one made. So the broken key was still in her car. Presumably, the new key would have been on her key ring, which has never been found. Now, in the door of the driver's side of Jennifer's car, there was a, portable cell phone charger for her phone. But there did end up being one more thing that was found on Jennifer's car, and it's something that we wouldn't learn about for years and years down the road. And I'm actually going to make you wait until it comes up in the timeline before I tell you what it was. Don't hate me, but it's easier for me to stick with the timeline so that I don't miss, major details during each case. Now, another thing worth mentioning is that according to everyone who knew Jennifer, they say that her car was a lot like her bathroom, in the sense that everything in her house would be spotless and perfectly put together, but her bathroom and car would just be a hot mess all the time. But when Jennifer's car was discovered, it was pretty neat and tidy and not at all a mess, which wasn't how Jennifer's car typically looked. Now, maybe Jennifer had just so happened to have cleaned her car out, a day or two before she was reported missing, because you know how when you clean your car out, you keep it spotless for the next day or two before you fall right back into your bad habits. That's a possibility. Maybe Jennifer had cleaned her car out and was trying to keep it clean for those next few days, but, then again, we may never know. But it could also be that maybe whoever took Jennifer cleaned it out in the hopes of getting rid of any DNA evidence or fingerprints. Anything's possible. Although it is widely believed that Jennifer was somehow taken against her will, but we'll get further into that in just a few. So when searching Jennifer's car, there was no physical evidence anywhere on the car. There was no blood, no fingerprints, just nothing. There was one partial unknown DNA sample, but since it was only a partial DNA profile, there wasn't much that could be done with it. It wasn't enough to run. But the fact that no other DNA was found is weird, because you would think that at least Jennifer's fingerprints would have been found inside the car, outside the car, on the door handles, the trunk latch, the places that you touch in your car. You touch everything in your car. It was her car. But there was only one partial palm print able to be found, and it was from Jennifer. But like I said, it was her car. You would think that her DNA and fingerprints, hair, and fibers would just be all over every inch of that car, but it wasn't. Which leads everybody to believe that the car was wiped clean for any physical DNA evidence when the car was parked in the apartment complex a mile away from Jennifer's condo. And we already know that Jennifer's condo complex didn't have any kind of surveillance system or cameras whatsoever. There wasn't even a camera at the entrance or in the hallways or even in the parking lot. There just weren't any cameras at all that police could fall back on and use as a breadcrumb trail to track Jennifer's last movements. But the apartment complex where Jennifer's car was found, they did have a surveillance camera. They had two, actually. And you would think this would be a really good thing for Jennifer's case, but sadly, the footage that was captured on these two cameras only leads to more questions than it does answers. We're so used to cameras being everywhere that we are today, but this was 2006, and it just wasn't like that back then. So police go to the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment complex to look through the surveillance footage, because surely the camera would have caught whoever had been driving Jennifer's car when it was parked in the visitor's parking lot at the complex. So, as I've already mentioned, there were two cameras in the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment complex where Jennifer's car was found 48 hours after she was last seen or heard from. Now, both of these cameras at the apartment complex were aimed towards the community pool area. One camera was pointed in the same direction where Jennifer's car had been parked and found in, and the other camera faced more towards the gate and the exit of the pool area. The second camera that covered the exit to the pool and the gate was also pointed in the entrance of the parking lot where Jennifer's car was found. So to make it easier on myself, I'm just going to call them camera A and camera B. Camera A will be the one pointing in the direction of where her car was found. Camera B will be pointing towards the exit of the pool and the gate. So on camera A, you can clearly see in black and white footage that someone is driving Jennifer's car. They pull into the parking lot at around 12:30 p.m. on January 24th, and you can see them park Jennifer's car in the visitor parking lot where it was later found. And as a reminder, Jennifer was reported missing on January 24th, which was also the same day that this footage of someone parking Jennifer's car was captured. Now, it's important to mention that the footage is blurry and grainy, and like I already said, it's in black and white. So the footage quality is pretty bad. Bad enough that you can't make out any facial features of this person, much less anything else. But you can see Jennifer's car being driven into the parking lot and then being parked. Now, from here, whoever is driving the car sits in the car for an additional 32 seconds after the car is parked before they get out of Jennifer's car. And I don't care how good of a criminal you are, 32 seconds is not enough time to wipe down every ounce of DNA and evidence from an entire car. So, was it cleaned before it was dropped off at the apartment complex? We don't know, but I would guess so. So, camera A is an actual recording, like a video recording. Camera B is set up a little bit different. So when we switch to camera B, you see the same person who parked Jennifer's car, and they're captured on camera walking past a wrought iron gate fence that surrounds the pool. And you would think that this would be the smoking gun. I mean, we can literally see this person walking away from Jennifer's car and then past the pool. But camera B only snaps still images every 2 to 3 seconds. It doesn't record continuously like a video recording does. And I'll have the link to what both of these cameras caught listed underneath the description of this episode. It'll be the very last link listed under source credits. But I told you these recordings were going to cause more questions than answers, and I meant that. So when you're looking at these still shot images captured after Jennifer's car was parked, the person walking by the gate that surrounds the pool, their face is blocked perfectly by the iron rods around the fence. And because this camera only snaps a new image every 2 to 3 seconds, every single time that you see this person walk by and the camera snaps a picture, this person's face is covered perfectly in every image that was taken in relation to Jennifer's disappearance. There are so many still images of this person just casually walking away from Jennifer's car after they parked it, and in every single picture, the wide wrought iron posts are blocking this person's face entirely. And there are really a very small amount of details that you can really see, and that's for a few different reasons. For one, the camera quality is shit. For two, the images and recordings are both in black and white. And thirdly, those damn wrought iron fence posts. But because these are all in black and white, it's really hard to tell what color pants, shirts, shoes, etc. that this person might be wearing. And people speculate about the color of the clothes that this suspect is wearing, but there's really no way to know for sure what colors are on anything because it's all in black and white. This person never looks back at Jennifer's car, and they're walking like they know exactly where they're going. Now, for obvious reasons, this person is suspected to be a male, but the height makes some people question that, and we'll talk about this person's height in just a few. So it does kind of look like this person is wearing either work boots or high-top shoes, and the clothes are speculated to almost be like a painter's uniform, and if you know anything about painters, they always wear painter whites. So white pants, white shirt. But with these images being in black and white, the suspect could easily be wearing a bright green shirt and neon orange pants. We just don't know. And one more thing that makes me personally question whether or not this suspect is a male or female is the hair in the still images that we do have. It almost looks like a man bun, or like it's pulled into a bun of some kind, or it could be even like somebody's hair tucked up and under like a ball cap maybe. And not to say that men can't have long hair, but this kind of, to me anyways, it kind of reminds me of just like a messy bun. But the public wouldn't actually see these pictures until 12 days after Jennifer's car was found. And then it was even longer than that, like months later, that police finally released the full video that we have today. And we've talked about holdback evidence that the police will use a ton on this podcast. They will purposely hold back vital information from the public as a way to be able to make sure that they have the right person for the crime. For instance, the suspect may know something about the crime that was never released to the public, hence letting law enforcement know for sure that the only way they would have this information is if they were involved in the crime. So I can understand why they would wait to release all of these video recordings that they had along with, the still shot images that they had. But then again, I almost feel like this would have given the suspect ample time to flee the area or even the country if you're going with the theory that one of the construction workers from her complex are responsible. And even that would be pretty hard to track down just because the complex didn't keep up with who was working and who was there like they should have. Now, naturally, police and most of the public believed that if we could figure out who's in these recordings and still shot images, then it would crack this case wide open. But there have been so many people try to enhance this image and retouch this image and try to clear things up and fix how grainy and blurry it is. And even with the technology that we have today, there has still not been anyone who's been able to clear these images and recordings up enough to be able to tell who this person is. This case drew me in so bad just for the simple fact that this person is walking so casually, it's almost like he doesn't even know that there are cameras there. If so, why would he walk right by the only 2 cameras on this property? And then, how would they know to time their steps perfectly to be able to avoid their face being caught on camera? And I don't know that we know this for sure if this person is a male or a female, but for sake of clarity and my sanity, I'm just going to refer to them as the suspect or the male. Now, on the House of Broken Dreams, the Jennifer Kesse story on this podcast, it's really good. Go listen to it. It's a deep dive on this case. I highly recommend. It was said that calls have come in over the years that claim that the grocery store right across the street from the Huntington on the Green apartment complex, that the employees of that grocery store also wear like khaki pants and shirts like the man in the video is seen wearing. But because it's all in black and white, it could be an outfit like a construction worker would wear, or it could be just like an everyday outfit. But the man on this video is so super thin and not at all tall. The man in these videos and images is supposedly supposed to have been studied by the FBI and NASA or something crazy like that. And they've estimated that this man is between 5'3" tall and 5'5" tall. So a shorter statured man with a really thin build. And it's not like Jennifer was some 5 foot tall, tiny little girl. She was reported as being 5'8" tall and roughly 125 pounds. But she was also super safety conscious, and she would have most definitely known how to fight back and draw attention to herself. Hell, she was even taught that if someone ever tried to get into her car or carjack her, to just wreck her car so that it would give her a higher probability of being able to get away. So I just can't fathom a scrawny little guy that's 5'3" being able to overpower Jennifer. But that's just my opinion. Something else that I don't remember if I've said it or not already, but when Rob went with the officers to check out Jennifer's car when it was first found, one of the first things that Rob noticed was that the driver's seat was positioned further back than where Jennifer would have been able to drive the car comfortably. Which also doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either, though, because the man that's seen in the images from the apartment complex where the car was found is believed to be between 5'3" and 5'5", and Jennifer was 5'7". So you would think that if the seat would have been moved at all, that it would have been moved closer to the steering wheel than where Jennifer would have left her seat, because the man walking away from her car is supposedly shorter than Jennifer, not taller. But I don't know, this case will give you a headache from the not knowing, and I cannot fathom what Jennifer's parents go through on a day-to-day basis trying to go through this case. Now, another thing to note is that the pepper spray that Jennifer always carried on her keys with her was found inside of her condo. But that's thought to have been left in her condo for a pretty logical reason. Jennifer and her boyfriend Rob had just been on the vacation, so Jennifer wouldn't have been able to take that pepper spray on her keys with her through the airport. And maybe she just hadn't had time to put them back on her key ring yet, which makes sense because she'd only been back for one full day before the morning that she was reported missing. Now, Jennifer's parents went full out private investigative type shit on this case, and I mean, you can't blame them. Jennifer's parents were even able to get in touch with Google because Google Earth was actually in beta at the time of Jennifer's disappearance, which is just when Google Earth is taking random pictures of certain areas. But when Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce Kesse, went to Google to see if Google had possibly captured any images in the area where Jennifer disappeared from, sadly, Google Earth wasn't taking pictures anywhere near that area or street. So that was no help. Jennifer's parents even used their military connections to try to find out if, like, quote-unquote, Big Brother was looking down on the area when Jennifer disappeared, and again, it just so happens that even though Big Brother is supposedly always watching, they weren't watching that area on that day, and had nothing that could help move this case along, which has to be the biggest gut punch in the world. I mean, her parents have literally tried anything to be able to get any more answers about where Jennifer is, and the military or Google itself were absolutely no help. Jennifer's family believes that whoever the suspect is had to have had some kind of ties to Jennifer's condo complex, just for the simple fact that the car was parked so close by to where Jennifer lived, and also because the suspect parked Jennifer's car and then left walking. So likely they wouldn't have been walking for long. And if it was a construction worker like her family thinks, then they would have probably been able to slip away from work for just long enough to go park her car and walk back. And it's also likely to assume that no one would have even noticed a missing construction worker within that complex because they just let anyone in and out. So from here, police brought in like scent tracker dogs who were able to track a scent from where Jennifer's car was found at the Huntington on the Green apartment complex all the way back to Jennifer's condo complex, which immediately indicates that whoever parked Jennifer's car, then for whatever reason, they went right back to where Jennifer lived in the condo complex. So again, that's weird. This kind of makes sense if Jennifer's family believes that it was a construction worker. Why else would someone park the car there and then go back to her condo complex? Especially considering that it's kind of widely assumed that the condo complex is possibly the crime scene. So why would the suspect return to the scene of the crime after dropping Jennifer's car off? It doesn't make logical sense unless it was a construction worker. And now that police were actually looking for Jennifer and treating her disappearance like a missing persons case, they went to Jennifer's condo complex and tracked down any potential eyewitnesses to see if there was anything that could help find Jennifer. Witnesses and neighbors of Jennifer's claim to have seen Jennifer's car driving erratically at about 7:40 a.m. on the morning that Jennifer went missing. But to my knowledge, no one was able to see who was driving or if there was more than one person in the car. And this leads me to ask two different questions. One, was Jennifer forced into her car in the parking lot at her condo? Like as she was getting ready to leave for work and then maybe possibly held at gunpoint and told to drive by the suspect and, forced her to get into her own car and drive? Or two, was someone else driving the car with Jennifer, like incapacitated or possibly unconscious in the back seat or in the trunk? Because either way, that would make sense as to why the car would be all over the road. Because if Jennifer had been forced into the car and then told to drive, she would have known to try to draw attention to herself and her car. And she would have even possibly have tried to wreck the car because that's what she'd always been told to do if she was ever carjacked. She knew that would have given her a better chance at being able to escape once the airbags were deployed. And then if someone had just abducted Jennifer or somehow got her in an unconscious state, then they would have been able to drive, like they would have been driving all over the road just to try to leave the scene as quickly as possible. So either way makes sense in my head. And I wonder if security cameras in the area were checked. Because Jennifer's condo complex was directly across the street from, like, the Mall of Millennia or something like that, whatever it's called. Surely this big-ass mall would have security cameras in the parking lot. And if not, what about cameras at any of the gas stations nearby, or grocery stores, or pharmacies, or literally anywhere within the proximity of the area of where Jennifer's condo complex was? I don't know if any of those kind of security cameras were ever checked. I didn't see it anywhere, but I could be wrong. So, for months after Jennifer went missing, her family and friends stood on street corners near her condo, handing out missing persons flyers with Jennifer's information on it. But no matter how hard her parents fought for answers, there just weren't any. And normally I don't like to badmouth police work, but the police work in the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance was royally fucked up from the very beginning. The car was never taken into evidence, her condo was never checked for DNA or fingerprints, and police made the Kesse family feel more like a burden than anything else. It was at the 10-year anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance that Drew and Joyce Kesse made a public plea to Jennifer's suspected killer. Drew asked whoever was responsible for where Jennifer is now, or what may have happened to her, to just tell them where she was. They say that they just want to be able to bring her home, and Jennifer's dad, Drew, even says, whatever you wanted with her 10 years ago has to be over. You cannot still need her after 10 years, so just let us know where she's at. But eventually, after the 10-year anniversary, 3 more years would pass, and older detectives were retired, and new detectives were coming in the place of the older ones, and this went on like this for entirely too long with absolutely no kind of closure or answers. And eventually, Drew and Joyce Kesse sued Orlando PD in December of 2019, basically telling Orlando PD that Jennifer had been missing for 13 years, and that they wanted access to all of the police records, files, reports, pictures, videos. They wanted everything. Drew and Joyce Kesse figured if the Orlando Police Department wasn't going to actually work the case to find out what happened to Jennifer, then they would do it themselves. And the Orlando PD and the Kesse family eventually settled this suit in March of 2019. I think I just misread. I think December of 2018 is when they filed it. They settled in March of 2019. So essentially what happened was Drew and Joyce sued the police department for all the records, files, pictures, etc., and the police department kind of fired back, telling the Kesse family that they wanted 6 more months to try to work Jennifer's case before they handed copies of everything that they had over to them. At this point, you've had the case for 13 years. If you haven't found it, if you're not working it, at least let somebody else do it. And even though there weren't any new tips or leads coming in, and even though this case wasn't being actively worked, the Orlando Police Department still didn't want to classify Jennifer's case as a cold case, but the Kesses did want it classified as a cold case. There are a lot more resources and things that you can do and try in a cold case, and there would at least be a cold case detective assigned to her case. But that never happened. So the Kesse family figured the next best thing would be to take it to court, which is when they went through with the lawsuit asking for all the information that the police had. And this was a long, drawn-out thing where the Kesses would put in a request for the records, and it would be denied by Orlando Police Department. So that's when they finally got an attorney and filed a lawsuit. But once the Kesses won that lawsuit, they were informed that all of the files would have to be redacted, and that if they wanted the more than 16,000 pages of police notes and records, then it would cost them roughly $18,000. And the Kesses said bet. They paid that outrageous amount of money for all 16,000 plus pages of files that had been accumulated during the last 13 years that Jennifer had been missing. They also hired a licensed private investigator named Michael Toretta to help work the case. And then, of course, Drew and Joyce were supposed to have gotten all of these files from Orlando PD within a 3 or 4 month span, and it took years of being sent small sections of the files at a time. And by the time the Kesse family actually got all the files and had their team of investigators go through them, they were almost unreadable with how heavily redacted they were. So you know how you can sometimes pull up pictures of police files online? And they'll have the names blacked out and personal information blacked out. That's what would have been redacted from these files. That's how much had been redacted. So essentially, they paid $18,000 for more than 16,000 pieces of blacked out files. Which is insane. Why is the victim's family having to pay for these to be redacted? What do we pay taxes for? And Drew even later said that it looked like someone had taken all 16,000 pages and kind of thrown them on the ground and kicked them around, and then picked them up and just made a bunch of copies and had them sent over to the Kesse house. Drew and Joyce ended up having to pay someone to help them go through and organize and categorize all these files. That's how badly these files were jumbled up once they were finally sent over from Orlando PD. Now, remember the evidence that I said was found outside of Jennifer's car that wouldn't be learned about for years? Well, Drew and Joyce Kesse are going through the files and pictures and stuff, and there are more than 100 pictures of Jennifer's car. Which is great because the Kesses had only ever been shown a handful of pictures of Jennifer's car by the police. So as they're going through the rest of these pictures that they'd never seen, they noticed something on the hood of Jennifer's car. And it looked like some kind of attack or altercation or struggle of some kind had taken place on the hood of Jennifer's car. Drew Kesse is quoted saying, quote, "It looked as if someone was thrown hands down on top of the hood, arms spread out, and then dragged back, almost like off the hood, to the point where you can almost see fingers scribbling down the hood." So, of course, these are pictures that Drew and Joyce had never seen before. So, to them, this seems like new information that they'd already found, since they'd gotten the files. So they call Orlando PD to tell them about it and to ask if it was something that they were already aware of. And when Drew asked the detective if they'd seen the hood of Jennifer's car in the pictures too, the detective just said, "Yep, that's your crime scene." Okay, so for years, the police had made Drew and Joyce feel like they were crazy for thinking that Jennifer was attacked or taken. And now this detective is just blatantly telling them "Yep, we know that the hood of the car is our crime scene." That is so wild. And as it turns out, Orlando PD had always suspected that the hood of the car was the crime scene. There was a police report from the day that Jennifer's car had been found that said that it looked like someone had been pushed on top of the hood of Jennifer's car. And what's even crazier than the police department barely even acknowledging that there was a crime is the fact that they knew from the day that her car was found that the hood of the car was most likely the crime scene. And still, the hood of the car was never processed for DNA, swabbed for DNA, fingerprinted, nothing. So, was Jennifer possibly attacked from behind while she was getting into her car to go to work that morning? Maybe she was fumbling with her keys or digging through her purse and someone came up behind her and then the two struggled on the hood of her car until the suspect was able to regain control. It's possible, but we just don't know. And the private investigator that Drew and Joyce Kesse hired, Michael Toretta, said, quote, "These photos look suspicious and show what looks like a hand mark going across the hood. This new clue in tandem with the person of interest proves that Jennifer was most likely abducted. And now, in 2023, both the Orlando Police Department and the Kesse family believe that Jennifer was abducted on her way out to her car the morning of January 24th, 2006. It's believed that this person slammed her down on the hood, restrained her, and then put her in the car and took her somewhere. The person of interest, who, though unconfirmed, is believed to be male, dressed in workman's clothes, and he again has never been identified. And this isn't just your average, private investigator. Michael Toretta, the PI that the Kesses hired, is a former FBI agent and a licensed PI. So you would think he knows his shit. Now, also in these pictures, Drew also noticed a boot print by the gas pedal of the car, but it was too big to have been from one of Jennifer's boots. But that didn't really seem to go anywhere either. And at some point, we learned that Jennifer's phone had been turned off the night before she was reported missing, sometime after Jennifer and Rob got off the phone. But Jennifer used her landline phone to call Rob because she didn't get very good signal in her condo. So unless Jennifer turned her cell phone off every single night to charge it, and this was something that she did regularly, then this seems weird to me. Because if it's not something that she normally did, then why turn it off this night? And then it's never turned back on. Which I guess, since she did have a landline phone, then if someone needed to get in touch with her, that they would be able to just call her landline. I don't know. Jennifer's phone, purse, car keys, iPod, work briefcase, and everything else that she would have normally taken to work with her, none of these things have ever been found. And then Jennifer's brother's friend, the one who left his cell phone at Jennifer's condo the weekend that she and Rob were out of town, his phone was never found either. And we can only assume that Jennifer had his cell phone with her when she left the house that morning because she was planning to, UPS it to him or FedEx it back to him. And it wasn't in her condo or her car anywhere, which leads me and a lot of other people to believe that she had it with her the morning that she was abducted. And that's essentially it. Jennifer has still never been found, and nothing new has been called in or found to revamp this case. So now I want to go over a few of the suspects in this case and then go over some theories. because there are actually a few suspects, and there are enough theories that if you started reading them, then you'd never have to find anything else to read because there are just that many. And I'm not going to be able to go over every single suspect or every single theory because we'd be here for months. But I do want to go over some of the most well-known suspects and a few different theories before we sign off for this week. The first guy is a man that goes by the name of Chino. And this is probably the most well-known suspect in Jennifer's disappearance, although he's never been arrested and is presumed innocent until proven guilty. When the video footage of the suspect parking Jennifer's car and the pictures that were captured that were released to the public by Orlando PD, there were several tips that came in regarding this man named Chino. And these tips came in over the course of time that Orlando PD was working on the case before the Kesse family essentially had to pay for the investigation to be handed over to them. But anyways, so about 3 years after Jennifer's disappearance, a woman who was working at Jennifer's condo complex as a housekeeper called in to say that Chino had been doing some work on Jennifer's condo the week before she went missing. This woman also told police that the man in the video and in the pictures that they'd released to the public looked a lot like Chino. And she based this on the way the man in the video's hair looked, the way he dressed, things like that, the way he carried himself. And then there was another anonymous tip that came in that also claimed to think that Chino needed to be looked into further regarding Jennifer's disappearance. And this tip was also based on the surveillance footage and the pictures that police had released to the public. And then there was even a third woman who was also living in the same complex as Jennifer. She claims that as soon as she saw the video of the suspect parking Jennifer's car and then walking by the gate, she immediately thought that it was Chino. But when police tracked Chino down, they found him in a prison for statutory rape of a teenage girl. His height is the first thing that doesn't really match up to the suspect profile. Chino is 5'9" tall, and the suspect in the video is believed to be between 5'3" and 5'5". And like I said, the FBI and NASA are the ones that analyze the video and pictures to come up with this height guesstimation. So if the height estimation is right, then Chino doesn't add up. Chino doesn't match that. But police did learn that Chino was a maintenance worker at the complex where Jennifer lived, and that he also used to live in one of the other buildings in Jennifer's complex. So it also didn't help that Chino had done work in Jennifer's condo just the week before she vanished. And even though Jennifer had made it clear that some of the workers in her complex made her uncomfortable, I'm still going to assume that if one of the workers walked up to Jennifer, let's just say in the parking lot of the complex, that she would probably just assume that they needed to know something about her condo, or maybe that they were approaching her because they had a question about some work that they did or were supposed to have been doing on her condo, something like that. So would she have felt safe enough to let this worker from her complex, who she would have known, approach her in a parking lot and give them the chance to get close enough to possibly attack her? I don't know, maybe. Now, one detective entered the name Chino into like a keyword tracking system, and that's when he learned that another tip about Chino had come in just a week after Jennifer's disappearance. This tip was also anonymous, and we aren't even sure if this tip was ever looked into initially. So there's that. Now, the rape that Chino was in prison for, he had committed that rape just 2 years after Jennifer vanished. So while he's not the best guy in the world, is it possible that he escalated over time? Sure, but we may never know. Chino was interviewed from prison in 2009, and he was asked about working inside of Jennifer's condo. Now, Chino said that he had worked in Jennifer's condo the week before she disappeared, and that she had let him in. And Chino says that he had worked on Jennifer's condo the week before she disappeared, and that she had let them in. First of all, who is them, and why were there more than one worker at the time sent to her condo? I've never lived in an apartment or a condo, so I could be wrong, but I feel like they'd only send one worker at a time unless it was like a super big job, which nothing at Jennifer's condo that needed to be fixed would have been a major repair. It was all simple stuff like paint touch-ups or plaster touch-ups, things like that. So nothing that I'm assuming would really take more than one person, but again, I could be wrong, this could be standard. And then Chino was asked if everything had gone normally during this last interaction. And he remembered that Jennifer had gotten ready for work, and then she had asked him to lock the condo up when he was finished. And then he says that Jennifer left for work. We know this can't be right, though, because Jennifer never let a worker into her condo when she wasn't home. And she would even ride home on her lunch breaks to let these workers in, and then she would just stand by the open door on one of her, safety calls with a friend or family member the entire time that the workers were inside of her condo. And then when it would be time for her to go back to work, she would ask the workers to leave, and then she would lock her condo up behind her. So I don't know if this is maybe a thing where Chino is misremembering or what. Like maybe he worked with so many different people day in and day out that he doesn't actually remember the very last time that he saw, spoke to, or interacted with Jennifer. And maybe the majority of the people at the complex would have allowed workers to stay inside of their condo when they weren't home to fix something, or maybe some of the people that did live in the complex would have told the workers to lock up when they finished. Who knows? But that's a little weird for sure, considering we know how safety conscious Jennifer was. Chino was shown the pictures that were taken from the apartment complex when the suspect parked Jennifer's car and then walked off, and he was asked if that was him in the pictures, and he said that it wasn't. Chino even agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. Again, we all know that doesn't say much, but it is worth mentioning. Chino also cooperated with anything that police asked of him, and the manager at the apartment complex claims that there were no incidences that he was aware of where Jennifer and Chino had problems. Eventually, police had to move on from Chino. Another suspect that comes up a lot on this list is Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, Matt. Now, remember how Jennifer's brother, Logan, had a friend that spent the weekend at Jennifer's condo when Jennifer and Rob were on vacation, out of town? Which, this would have literally been days before her disappearance. Okay, so Logan and his friend, the one who left his cell phone at Jennifer's place, they stayed at Jennifer's condo as in overnight through the weekend. But there was someone else who had come over to hang out with Jennifer's brother Logan and his friend. That person who came over just so happened to have been Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, Matt. Now, Logan was actually really good friends with Matt, and I'm not sure if Logan and Matt were friends before Matt and Jennifer started dating, or if they became friends because Matt and Jennifer started dating. But either way, they were really good friends. Now, Jennifer had broken things off with Matt, and he wasn't really ready to let her go. He ended up kind of pursuing her for a while after their breakup, but this would have been before Jennifer met her current boyfriend, Rob. So Matt had also come over and hung out for a little while, but he did not spend the night. And I'm not sure how Jennifer felt about this, or if she just kind of looked at it like she knew that he was friends with her brother, and by this time, Jennifer and Matt had both moved on and they were in different relationships, so maybe it just wasn't a big thing. And besides the obvious reason of Matt being Jennifer's ex-boyfriend and potentially being a suspect, police also looked into Matt because he just so happened to have been at the Blue Martini Bar on January 23rd, 2006. So January 23rd would have been the very first night that Jennifer had come home from her trip with Rob, and that would have also been the day before she was reported missing. And it said that on this night, while Matt was at this bar, which this bar just happened to also be across the street from Jennifer's condo, but that while he was at this bar, he was shit-faced drunk. And this bar isn't really close to where Matt lived either, so there's that. Now, possibly the booze and being right across the street from Jennifer's condo doesn't seem weird until you wonder if maybe being inside of Jennifer's condo with all the pictures of Jennifer sitting around, smelling her scent, being around her things, and also now he would have known where her new condo building was. Maybe he got drunk and started missing Jennifer. And maybe this would explain the knock at Jennifer's door that she told Rob about while they were on the phone that night. Because remember, Rob says that Jennifer told him that there was a knock on the front door sometime around 10 p.m. while they were on the phone the night before Jennifer went missing. And Jennifer had told Rob that it was probably her upstairs neighbor and that she wasn't going to answer it. But what if it wasn't her upstairs neighbor? What if it was her ex-boyfriend, Matt? And again, Matt is also presumed innocent until proven guilty, and that's all I'm saying. But we just don't know who was knocking on her front door that night. Matt was ruled out as a suspect by police, but people still do question his involvement. And it seems like Jennifer was just a guy magnet, and if you look her up, you'll see why. She was absolutely gorgeous, and not just in the traditional pretty kind of way, but she was also smart and natural and just a bold kind of way. It just makes her, I don't know, she's very gorgeous, very different. I could see why men would be attracted to her. And that may have been what attracted one of Jennifer's co-workers to become almost infatuated with her. Johnny Compass, who has also been cleared as a suspect in Jennifer's case, and again, because I ain't trying to get sued, Johnny is also presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But we're going to talk about it anyways. Johnny was crazy obsessed with Jennifer, even though he was married. But marriage vows be damned, because Johnny didn't have any problem at all letting everyone that they work with know that he wanted Jennifer. Jennifer was polite with her letdowns, and she explained that she doesn't date co-workers because she wasn't willing to risk the career that she had worked so hard to achieve, not to mention the fact again that Johnny was married. And Johnny even told another co-worker just days before Jennifer's disappearance that he wasn't happy that Jennifer had gone on a trip with her boyfriend. Now, supposedly, on the day that Jennifer was reported missing, Johnny showed up late to work, claiming that he'd gotten pulled over and then put in jail. He didn't make it to work until about 12 p.m. or something along those lines. I don't know how credible this is. It's just something that I seen and I thought I'd mention because it sounds crazy. What did you do at a traffic stop to get locked up? I mean, what happened there? But then there was also a comment made by Johnny that if it's true, it's going to make your skin crawl. Just the day after Jennifer vanished, Johnny and another co-worker were talking about how crazy it was that one of their co-workers had been reported missing and how they still hadn't been found. And Johnny tells his co-worker that Jennifer had probably been eaten up by the alligators by now. Which is a weird thing to say in general, but it's even weirder considering that this was only one day after Jennifer had been reported missing. No one knew if Jennifer was, dead or alive, or if she had gotten a car wreck somewhere. They had no idea at this point what had happened. Hell, we still don't know what happened. But, why would you even say that to begin with? So, the theory with Johnny is that he abducted Jennifer, did whatever he did to her, and then he probably paid someone to park Jennifer's car so that he would be able to show back at work with this crazy jail story by 12 p.m., and that would kind of be his alibi. And this may also explain why no one heard a scream, because if a coworker walked up to Jennifer in her condo parking lot, she's probably going to think it's weird, but she's not going to feel threatened enough to scream or make a scene until she would already be in danger. So the theory that police are going with is that Jennifer was attacked or subdued on her way to the car that morning after she'd walked out of her condo to leave for work. But that's really the only thing that they think. But I kind of think there's another reasonable possibility. So, if it was a construction worker, then someone could have attacked Jennifer as she was locking her door to her condo. And since there are a lot of empty units that, weren't used and were being renovated, that maybe she was just taken to a different unit and killed there. And I feel like this theory is even given a little more validation in my book just because we know that there was a condo across the hallway from Jennifer's condo that was unlocked all the time, and that there were about 10 different construction workers staying in that condo at a time. And then you have to remember that these construction workers are there to paint and do carpet replacement and, all kinds of other renovations and construction would be going on. This would have made it pretty easy to hide a crime scene, especially if police didn't check every single empty unit in that complex for evidence. And then there were quite a few calls that came into Orlando PD about a man in a truck who had been seen dumping a rolled up piece of carpet that was between 6 to 8 feet long into a lake within a reasonable distance from Jennifer's condo on the day of her disappearance. That lake has been searched and nothing has ever been found. And then something that I've been thinking about within this case is that if there were some of the construction workers that had been permitted or allowed to stay in some of these empty condos in Jennifer's complex, then who's to say that the workers who were given permission to stay didn't have friends over or didn't have a buddy that rode with them to work? So, maybe they let this person that they give a ride to just stay with them in the condo overnight sometimes to make it easier on the weekdays. The way that these construction workers weren't kept up with, and the way that this complex didn't even know half of the people who were coming in and out doing work there, just leads me to believe that there could have been workers that were staying in condos that were empty that nobody knew about, that nobody had permission to stay there. And it's likely that no one from the complex would have even known about it. And something else that I keep thinking about is that Jennifer normally left for work at about 7:30 a.m., and if her car was being driven by someone else and being parked at about, what time was it, 12 or 12:30 p.m., then that's only about a 5 to 6 hour window to take Jennifer, do whatever was done, dispose of her body, clean the car, and leave absolutely no trace of evidence behind. That's really not that long, especially when you think about how far the suspect would have been able to drive to do whatever was done to Jennifer. Because the suspect wouldn't have been able to drive for, 2 hours to dispose of the body and then drive 2 hours back to drop her car off. That would only leave about an hour to get rid of evidence, completely clean the car of DNA, fingerprints, fibers, hairs. I just don't see it. I feel like it had to have been done sort of close by to where Jennifer lived. Now, there are 2 more theories that I want to touch on super quick, and then we'll be done. Stalking. It is possible that Jennifer had a stalker that she didn't even know about. And if they were watching her and they were stalking her, then they would have known what time she left for work. They would have known what time she typically got home. They would have known what time she ate lunch. They would have known damn near everything about Jennifer. And I realize that this sounds unlikely, but then we see cases like the Idaho 4 murders, so it's possible. And then sex trafficking, which would explain why Jennifer was taken, but none of her things were taken. And at the time of Jennifer's disappearance, there was actually a huge human trafficking ring that was brought down in the Florida area. It's also safe to note that Orlando, Florida is like the 6th most highest state for sex trafficking in the U.S. So, there's that. And the latest update that I've been able to find was in April of this year, 2024. MySunCoast.com reported that they were using a sonar company to search the lake where the eyewitnesses claimed to have seen the truck dumping the 6 to 8 foot rolled up carpet at. But I haven't seen any further updates besides that. And I believe that is all I have for you this week. So, let me know what you think about this case, because I'm genuinely curious. But it's time for my crotch goblins, so let's do it again. Same time, same place, next Wednesday. See you then.
That's how my mama murdered a podcast.